Hi, I'm Brian Russell, and I want to introduce the teaching video that Rich Lewis and I recorded live at the December 2022 Centering Prayer Gathering. We talk about how to deal with the thoughts that arise during centering prayer. If you'd like to be invited to future gatherings, you can go and sign up today at www.centeringprayerbook.com. You can also check out the show notes for contact information for me and for Rich, and to find links to more centering prayer resources. We hope to see you in a future gathering, but I trust that this presentation will serve you in deepening your practice. Yeah, and today we're going to talk about thoughts in centering prayer. And Rich, why don't you start us off?
Sure. And I had written a piece maybe a month ago that kind of talks about the layers of thoughts. So I'll kind of read through it or reflect on it, and then Brian and I will just kind of go back and forth on different topics. So, I had written something called "What are the layers of thoughts during centering prayer?" And it's as as I see it, and everybody else has their own experience. So maybe I'll just read it. It's probably the easiest way. So, what are the layers of thoughts during centering prayer? I don't want to sit right now. I have too much going on. I have many things that require my attention this moment. With your sacred word, you let go of these thoughts and return to God, who patiently waits for you in the present moment. I enjoyed the family gathering yesterday. I wish my son would listen to me. My boss asked me to take on a task I have no interest in performing. With your sacred word, you let go of these thoughts and return to God, who patiently waits for you in the present moment. I have many errands to do before the day ends. What will I have for dinner tonight? Maybe I'll see a movie tonight. With your sacred word, you let go of these thoughts and return to God, who patiently waits for you in the present moment. Similar to a runner's high, I've now entered the space between my thoughts. They no longer grasp my attention. I easily let them float by without resisting or clinging to them. I sink deeper and deeper into the bottomless depths of God. The closing bell goes off. I do not know where I went, but I know I was not asleep. I rested in the rest of God. I was beyond my thoughts and emotions. I was in the spaces between my thoughts. I removed the barriers between God and I, little b and big B, no words or thoughts required. So that was just kind of a reflection as I thought about thoughts and the layers of thoughts that I experienced in centering prayer. So I thought it was fun to write that, and I thought I would just share it as we talked about thoughts, and you folks could reflect upon what happens to you during centering prayer as thoughts come up, and what kinds of thoughts may come up for you.
Yeah, and that's fun. Actually, we could all do that. Just sit there, and you can do that with journaling sometimes too. Because obviously, when you're doing centering prayer, you can't necessarily reconstruct your thought stream. But if you sit with a piece of paper and just use that to clear your mind and write down everything that's in your head, you'd get something really similar to what Rich ended up with too. And that's kind of a fun exercise, just to see how distracted we are sometimes. If we're honest, just sit in silence and write down whatever comes up, or type it really fast, just to see. So thank you, Rich. And I'm going to share, I'm going to share a couple things. I'll put our little link for resources and contact for Rich and I here in the chat, but I'm going to paste a quote into the chat here, just to get started on my first contribution for today. This is a quote from my book on what's just called Centering Prayer. Sitting quietly in God's presence can change your life. And I wrote, centering prayer allowed me to find freedom from a mind that would not shut off, which Rich just kind of illustrated for us. At the darkest of my dark night of the soul, I didn't need more information. In the silence, I rediscovered God, who loves me unconditionally. And that's part of my testimony. And in a sense, that almost is a nutshell what I was trying to capture in my own book, in my own journey. I came to centering prayer during a really challenging part of my life, where, again, I've even had a good friend saying, "Geez, Brian, you sound like you're kind of going crazy, talking incessantly." And I couldn't get my mind shut off, just full of anxiety. And I learned how to do the centering prayer, and slowly that allowed me to actually recognize the fact that I was all these looping thoughts continuously. And then with practice, slowly started punching holes in all of those thoughts that were running nonstop in my mind. And as I did it long enough, anxiety started lifting. And in moments, it doesn't happen every single time, but I had several contemplative moments where you're literally in pure silence in those little spaces between the thoughts. I essentially experienced, because that's the only word I can really do, experienced God's loving presence in a way that I would say has changed me ultimately forever and for good, just by being a recipient of grace. And so I love this topic because it's kind of ironic that sometimes our own thinking can actually be a block to experiencing the love of God. And so I will in my first share with that. So I'm definitely grateful for the silence and for learning this practice almost a little over a decade now ago.
Okay, I will go. Maybe two thoughts. God is not my thoughts. God, it's kind of what Brian was saying. God is beyond my thoughts. My thoughts only limit God. So, I think of it as I really need to let go of the box I put God in. God is much bigger than any words I can write or any things I can think. They really limit God. God is just immense and massive, and that's what I like about centering prayer. I mean, I pray verbally, and I do other forms of prayer, but that's what I like about centering prayer is I don't limit God. I just sit with God and trust the loving presence of God and let God pray in me what God knows I need, whether it's inner peace or calm or wisdom for tasks. And I think of, I'm connecting to infinite wisdom, the infinite resources of God. I don't have to do life alone. And I have to constantly remind myself of that. And that helps me get through the day and get through tasks that I perhaps don't even know how I'm going to do, but if I just sit and rest in God and realize that together we'll get through them, and I have a tremendous resource that I have to constantly remind myself of. So I guess I'll leave it at that and let you share a thought, Brian.
Yeah, and this is I'm going to post this again in the chat. This isn't actually a quotation from my book per se, but this is a reflection that I've done later, and I'm going to do a little extended piece just on this particular one, because one of the things that you run into with our thoughts, again, like Rich illustrated at the beginning, some of the thoughts are simply kind of harmless or even annoying, like did I start my watch? Or sometimes they're little worries, sometimes they're big worries, but over time, and this has been shown throughout the contemplative tradition, when you sit in silence long enough or for sustained blocks, you actually get confronted by what I would say are our inner demons. Now, some in the early church took that word literally and thought they would be attacked. Like if you ever read the life of Saint Anthony, who was one of the earliest monastics, he talked about being attacked by like the demon of lust while he was out in the desert. And they would start referring to like some of the 7 deadly sins of the demon of envy. Whether that has to be literal or not, I leave that to different people's individual beliefs and understanding of that kind of thing. But when I say inner demon for myself, it seems like we all have essentially hurt parts of ourselves. We have wounds, we have fear, we have guilt, we have shame. Some of those things were things that were done to us, lessons that we learned from other people that maybe weren't the right, when we made the wrong conclusions. And obviously, some of us, have sins that we've committed that we've held in, or things that we've hurt other people and we have regrets. And all those things can just kind of get compacted. And the danger is we end up pushing those things down because, you don't want to think about that kind of stuff, but it still sits in there, all those hurt parts. And when you're in silence, eventually, and I think this is the Holy Spirit's prompting, that stuff kind of floats up in your mind's eye and you get confronted with, bodily pains, sometimes thoughts, you have memories. I've seen people break into tears doing centering prayer long enough. I know Thomas Keating, when they first started doing the centering prayer silent retreats, they realized they needed to even bring therapists to these things because with doing extended times in silence, people would break down, have memories of traumas and things like that. And don't say that to scare anybody, but just to recognize that there are really difficult thoughts that show up sometimes. Now, for myself, and I think this is part of the healing process, we know we're sitting in God's presence when these things come up. And I know, and I talk extensively about this in my own writings. At first, when I was confronted by some of this stuff, I thought something was wrong with me, or that I was maybe even doing the centering prayer wrong. Because I'm thinking, like, why am I thinking about this now when I'm supposed to be sitting here with God? Upon reflection and just even study and talking to mentors and spiritual directors, I realized, okay, this is exactly what is supposed to happen, because God is using the silence to help me identify those pieces that, where you metaphorically need to kind of open up the closet or the door to the basement or something and let the Holy Spirit go into those difficult places and give those things back to God. So to me, that's one of the beauties of centering prayer in all the silence and solitude practices, because they actually teach us then to not resist the hurt parts of us, the parts we're ashamed of, the things we feel guilty about, or even our fears, but teach us just to hand those over to the God that truly loves us. And so those demons inside aren't really demons after all. They're just parts that we need to love enough to give to God and not be afraid to do that. And I found that super healing. And I'm going to just do one little more extended thing here, Rich, before I hand it back to you. There's an acronym, and some of you may have heard this before. I heard it first in the context of talking about welcoming prayer. And I've even heard like other secular meditation teachers use this. So it's fairly common in contemplative circles, but the acronym is the English word RAIN. And if I'm not catching my accent there, it's RAIN. So like rain, like rain, like rain from the sky. And those four letters there can represent how to actually receive one of these difficult thoughts or one of these hurt spots in us. It can also sometimes be when you're doing centering prayer, you get like a big pain. Like I have a spot right in the back of my shoulder, which is where I end up holding a lot of my painful memories. So I'll think about something and I'll get this sharp pain right in the back of my shoulder. Or sometimes or I'll get like a headache. That's why I don't have any hair right here. I get this headache right behind my forehead right here. And the RAIN teaches us, and this can all happen in a split second, these four things, and for the surrender, but sometimes you got to sit with something and let the thought kind of float by. And what RAIN stands for is recognize. So you actually recognize like this painful idea, this thought or discomfort, and then you bring your awareness to it for a moment, or it can be longer. And by doing that, then you can then investigate what's actually really going on. And then the idea then at the end stands for nurture. So it's like, what do I really need to do with this? What does this memory need? What does this hurt part of myself need? Ultimately, what does it actually need? It needs God's grace. And that's where we can just kind of surrender that. But that RAIN is just a way to kind of slow the process down for a minute, sit with something, and then release it to God. But it's, again, recognize, awareness, investigate, nurture. And you could search that on Google with centering prayer, even contemplative outreach, and you can find some more stuff on that. But I think that's a helpful metaphor. It's not that can be that is can be very healing in the context of different types of contemplative practices, not just in centering prayer. So, Rich, why don't you share one more, and then we'll see if maybe I have one more, but we'll see where we go into the practice at that point.
Sure. So, and if you think of, the letting go of our thoughts, engaged thoughts and engaged emotions during centering prayer, the letting go we do during centering prayer, is meant to continue with us the rest of the day. We're really to take this posture of letting go from our centering prayer practice. And what I mean by that is, we really don't want to hold on to, and I try not to hold on to thoughts and emotions that are not productive. that stop me from accomplishing my daily tasks and things I need to complete. I think of work. I remember last week I had to complete this giant spreadsheet full of data for a client, and I was putting it off and putting it off, and because it was kind of horrifying to me. And then I just had to tell myself, you know what? I don't think this will be painful, and I think I'll get it done rather quickly. And I was able to get it done in 30 minutes. So, that's an easy example of the letting go we do in centering prayer of our engaged thoughts. We need to do the same thing outside of centering prayer. Let go of all the things we tell ourselves where we make something much more difficult than it is in our mind. So I'm constantly telling myself that at work. I have a lot of work that has to get done, and my need to do list seems long. And I'll tell myself that each task is not as hard as I think it is, and I can get through it much quicker, and I'm going to have a great productive day. And I feed myself these thoughts rather than holding on to the thoughts of, oh my God, I'm never going to get through the day, and I'm never going to get this task done. So that's one thing I like about the centering prayer. The letting go follows us into our everyday life and really helps us and really serves us. And then the last thing I'll read is it's really from my book, because I really think it's true, and I constantly remind myself of this. I'm on a search to find the true me. I am a human being. I have a body. My body helps me accomplish my tasks. I have a mind. I have dreams and goals. My mind helps me plan my actions. I have thoughts and emotions. They help me express myself to this world. Am I my body? Am I my mind? Am I my thoughts and emotions? Who am I? God is within me. Within me, I am a human being. I'm also a divine being. I'm not God, but I know God is within me, and my body is the temple of God. I'm a divine being that allows God to express himself through me. So that's where I try to continuously remind myself is really I'm the expression of God out into the world. And when I keep that in the forefront, there's really nothing I can't accomplish, including the massive spreadsheet at work that was scaring the heck out of me in the middle of the week, that I'm really just a vehicle of expressing God into the world and God's wisdom and God's resources out into the world.
Yeah, and I love the way that you expressed all that, Rich, and I also like, obviously we don't have to. The centered prayer per se isn't like a hack just to help us with our task list. However, I love how you always are able to bring that back to, because most of us, well, I don't think any of us on this call are actually monastics that are doing this 24/7. We all have lives in the world. And I always love how you relate the fact that when we show up and do our centering prayer work, that God does then open us up so that when we leave whatever our prayer or metaphorical prayer closet, wherever that is, and we go into the world, we can bring our best self and show up hopefully with as little fear as possible, so that we can simply use our gifts and be vehicles of God's grace to others, whether it's a spreadsheet or in the classroom or putting shingles on a roof or whatever one does. So I always love how that you're able to connect that back to our lives in the world. So thank you. Yeah, I'll just share one quote. This is a quotation from Belden Lane, who has written some stuff on silence, and it's just one of a kind of a favorite that I have. And he asks a question, but I think the point of this is the answer is yes, but we only experience this in the silence. And the quote is, and I'll put this, it's in the chat also. It's, can we be free to let go of what's unimportant? In dying to the things that frighten and bind us most, can we embrace a fearlessness that frees us to love fiercely? That's a rhetorical question. He wants us to say yes to both of those, but it's one of those things that you have to live into through the sits. That's what God is slowly purging us. That's why, to use spiritual formation language, centering prayer is one of the the path. It's called the negative path, the via negativa in Latin. The via positiva, the positive way, is reading scripture, prayers with words, whether they're spontaneous prayers or like saying the Lord's Prayer or other things. Those are the positive way. The negative way are the spiritual formation practices that strip things away, that help us to unlearn and to break down strongholds. And that's exactly what centering prayer does. And that's, Thomas Keating talked about centering prayer is the way that God can do divine therapy. And, part of that work is strip away the things in our lives that aren't important, those things that separate us from God's love, and also strip away the idols in our lives that create the fear in our lives. Yeah, do you want to add anything else, Rich, before I let you kind of lead us in, or do you have any other pieces to wisdom to share this week?
No, I guess the only thing I would say, after outside of centering prayer, and you had mentioned it earlier, is journaling. So there's nothing wrong with, I do journal my thoughts, and whether they're positive or negative, just jot them down. And what are they? Because thoughts are powerful. They can harm us, or they can help us. So I jot down both, and then I recognize the ones I need to let go of, and then I hold on to the ones that are helping me and helping others, and productive. So thoughts are powerful and very helpful. It's just a matter of what thoughts are you feeding yourself, and let go of the ones that are not helping you and helping others, and serving, and hold on to the ones that are powerful and productive, and really are, that you're loved by God, that you're resilient, that there's nothing you can't accomplish. Those types of thoughts are the thoughts I want to hang on to, and let go of the thoughts that say, I'm not confident, I'm not ready for that task, or I'm the wrong person for the task. Those are the thoughts I let go of. So no, I just think it's a fun topic to discuss, because the thoughts, what you tell yourself is exactly what's going to happen. If you tell yourself you can't do something, you're not going to do it. If you tell yourself you can do something, you will do it.
It's good. It's good. Yeah, and I'm just in response to the journaling. This may help someone today. Just a simple journaling practice that kind of lets this is a not perfect version of a prayer of examine, if you go back to kind of the classic Christian journaling practice. But this is kind of this is what I do every morning that lets us accomplish in a journaling practice. I do journaling and centering prayer. I know Rich does also, but this is what my morning journaling thing is. What am I grateful for? Then I do like a thought feeling download, which is essentially answering to something like, what's bothering me? And I just try to notice if something is bugging me, if I have a weird sensation in my body, if I have a thought that's spiraling, maybe something I forgot about, maybe it's a fear, shame, guilt thought. Just write it all out to get it out. And then that's kind of a purge. And then what's God call me to do today? And then obviously get up from that and get after it. And that's how I kind of do my day, centering prayer first, and I do this journaling practice typically. So it's good. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. And this is the time when we'll shift from kind of theory to practice, because ultimately centering prayer is about practice and sitting with there, and not just we could read a million books, or we can spend 20 minutes together.